You are listening to And If Love Remains, a unique show spotlighting people, ideas, science, culture, and art. Your host, Mike Lovett.
Arizona, there is a bill currently pending before the Arizona State Legislature that would require school children, public school, charter school children, to recite the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. Now, this bill just passed the State House and was passed on a party line vote. All the Republicans in favor, all the Democrats against. This is a particular problem for people who are neither Democrats nor Republicans. Because if you point out the problems, and there are a panoply of problems with this pledge.
Right.
The conservatives claim you don't love your country, and the Democrats will think you side with them on everything, and the Republicans will think you side with the Democrats and everything. And in an article, I wrote an article for the New American, just got published I think 2 days ago, and I was saying, first of all, there are a lot of problems with the history of the Pledge of Allegiance.
For sure.
Right? Just the history of that little oath is worrisome and should be worrisome to conservatives. But apparently it's not enough so to keep, literally every Republican voted in favor. Then you've got, beyond the history of it, with the authorship of the pledge, the purpose for which it was written, then you've got the fact that it is completely, the principles of the pledge run contrary to the principles espoused by our founding fathers and enshrined in the Declaration and in the Constitution. How do we get conservatives, Republicans, to abandon their allegiance to the Pledge of Allegiance? How do we get them to be intellectually honest enough? How do we get them to be genuinely true to our founding principles, which they all claim they are?
Right.
How do we get them to do that? And that's the purpose of my article. And I made a little video on Instagram, sort of marketing it, I guess people would say, in a vulgar way, but I wasn't trying to market it. I was simply saying, conservatives, Republicans, many of you follow me. Can you read this and comment and tell me why, after having read this, you would still support a bill forcing children to recite this pledge? And so that was my genuine question. That was the purpose of the video. And then I said, comment on it, because I said it's one thing for you as conservatives, self-described conservatives, to surrender your children to be educated by the government you claim to loathe.
Mm-hmm.
But it's quite another to require them to learn to swear fidelity to the federal government.
Right.
So comments from the think tank.
I have some thoughts. Do you want to go first, Connor?
You go first.
Okay, so here's my first thought is, I think it's really important that you asked I think a really important question. How do we get people to realize? And so let me share my story a little bit, because I was a tried and true Republican. I was a guy who believed for the longest time that it was important to that being a good freedom-loving person meant espousing the principles of the Constitution, and part of that meant espousing the flag. Now, personally, I never had a problem. I had a problem with like laws that against like burning the flag and things. I thought that was against the First Amendment, even when I was young. But the Pledge of Allegiance was a big deal, and I think that when I realized, I had a friend that talked to me about the Pledge of Allegiance and what it really is saying. And as a God-fearing person, I think that's the important thing is, the very first commandment says, thou shalt not put any God before me. And when you pledge allegiance, give fidelity to that, you are literally stating that the country, that the federal government, that I'm going to pay my taxes before I'm going to pay my tithing, that I'm going to go against the principles of thou shalt not kill and go to war, that I'm going to hate my enemy,
that I'm going to go to war that isn't even a war, because
right.
Why since time immemorial has there been this custom among men of declaring war? No one ever asks that.
Right.
Why not just go to war? Why do you have to declare it? Because by declaring, Grotius is very clear on this, Devadal's very clear on this, by declaring war, you are announcing to the rest of humanity that you're pushing pause
right.
on the regular rules of coexistence.
That's right.
Chief among those, thou shalt not kill. I'm going to start killing you. And you have to present, in the declaration of war, you have to present your justification for violating this commandment that cuts across religion, that cuts across culture. There is no culture where it's fine to just kill wantonly.
That's right. And I think where the pledge plays a huge role in this, and it's something that we don't take seriously enough, is that it has become a sacrament. It has become something that every single day, it's a religious ceremony that we sit down, and that every child every day, and now it's going to be under the color of law, that we need to stand up and declare every day our fealty to the tyrant, that we need to say that no matter what my principles say, I am going to do what the federal government says.
Right. And the whole thing being, I can imagine Republicans who voted in favor of this, and the many Republicans who support this, who aren't elected representatives. I can hear them saying, that's not in the pledge. But it is.
It is. It is by definition.
Yeah, it is. And this is something that I used to talk about in school when I taught school. And I remember it was the second year so the first year at Gateway, at Heritage Academy Gateway, several of the kids would ask, why don't you say the pledge? I mean, I stood up because I did, there's no reason to sit down and make yourself a cause, but I wouldn't say. And so many kids would say, why don't you say it? And I would explain, like, what does pledge mean?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me right now. I don't know. What does allegiance mean? I don't know. What does indivisible mean? I don't know. You're saying these words, you're putting your hand over your heart, and you're looking at this thing, and you have no idea what you're saying. That should cause pause for you. That should cause you to go home and say, why are you surrendering me to a stranger to be educated? Why am I sitting here reciting an oath and I have no idea what I'm promising to do?
Right.
And the repetition cuts that deep.
It's a sacrament.
Deep tunnel in your brain. Mike, a physical presence in your brain that says flag equals hand on heart equals, allegiance to what? And how it became a conservative sacrament is a mystery.
Well, and here's the other thing I think that's important. I'm not giving Connor any time, but I got to say this. And I remember this specifically when Mitt Romney was running for president, but you can find it's not a Mitt Romney problem. It's a political class problem. It's a cultural problem. When he was asked, was he first an American or was he first a Mormon? How was he going to lead?
Right.
And I understand the politics of saying, you know what, I'm first a disciple of Jesus Christ. Like that wouldn't probably fly with many people, but that has to be the truth. And if we're not, we've got to start looking for leaders that say, my first principle is not the Constitution, is not the principle, is not what the legislature says. It is not anything but Christ. Christ is king. Exactly.
Simply said, no king but Christ. And that shouldn't be something that is anathema to conservatives. in America. And you're mentioning that I don't have fidelity to the Constitution or any of that. That's absolutely correct. And I remember always teaching people, like, here's a copy of the Constitution. Find me the word nation in it. It's find me where this is declared anything other than a union.
Right.
Here, and so in my article, I present the words of Patrick Henry, the words of James Madison, the words of Alexander Hamilton, saying, this is not a nation. This is a confederacy of sovereign, independent states. I mean, literally in the mouth. But this is my thing, guys, that I can hear a conservative being like, Agrippa, almost thou persuadest me.
Right.
I'm almost persuaded. It sounds good because here are the founding fathers that I actually trust rather than Joey, who I know has an angle, an agenda. Right? My angle is to make you freer, Slick.
Right.
Right? But that's cool. You think I have an agenda because that's what you're accustomed to by the talking heads. The paid, the loyal opposition.
But here's where I would agree with the progressives and the left. I would say, who cares what the Constitution says? What has the Constitution become? What is it now? Because it really doesn't matter. I mean, conservatives can spout all they want what the original intent of the Constitution was, or what the Bill of Rights really meant. And I think those are important discussions
because they don't know.
Right. But my point is, it doesn't, in a way, it doesn't matter because the Constitution, there is no Constitution. Listen, the tax law alone, the IRS immediately gets rid of the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the 10th Amendment. Like just that one agency alone destroys the Bill of Rights, and plus other things. So, but why in the world? I think that's a difficult thing. It's the traditions of man that get in the way.
Yes, that's true, and it has become a tradition, but it's only since the early 1900s.
Right.
We're talking 120 years that it's gone from there's hardly a school in America with a flag to there's hardly a school in America without a flag, much less just a school, a classroom now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mike, if you read the history, in 1880, you couldn't find a school with a flag or a classroom with a flag. Today, you can't find them without it.
But that's part of the plan. That's going to mass every single day. That's the putting out the incense every single day, for the congregants.
I saw the kids' reaction when I would take them to DC.
Right.
These buildings built larger than the scale of man. Why? To impress. Yep. This is an important place. Right. The Lincoln literally with his temple to the what?
Right.
Literally like the pose of Zeus with the apotheosis. I mean, literally. And these kids would get to the Vietnam Memorial and they'd cry, all these people protecting my liberty. All these people sacrificed to fascism.
Yeah. And
that's what you're swearing allegiance to, mate. And I don't count the kid. You can't, you're not making your own decisions. Your parents drop you off here every morning or put you on a bus every morning and drop you off. I tell you, Mike, there is not one of the parents of the hundreds of kids that I taught that could have told me my middle name or what town I was born in. That's disturbing.
Yeah.
Because you're saying, oh, well, the government says you're okay.
Right. I have a license. I have a, permission. So.
Connor?
Well, thank you.
Connor's like, thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity finally to step in on this.
No, I don't mind listening at all. It's not a big deal. But I think returning back to the original question, how can we get those who don't, view it the same way as we do? How can we help them, or at all? What would the strategy be? I think if we understand why, that could reveal a lot to how. And it goes back to what we were saying before, and maybe I should have interjected, but it comes back down to the idea of what they view as righteous. Because conservatives, for a while, I mean, no doubt. I mean, you can see this throughout history by other names, but they connect a sort of sacredness, a godliness to the power and the authority that they hold so dear above them, and they attach divinity to the character of their government, because that's what they live for.
Because I want to say that you've written something, you've studied this a lot. I want people to know, if people end up hearing this other than ourselves, that you've written on this subject. You've written a lot of very persuasive, powerful material on this concept of the deification of despots, and you've done a really good job of that. So that's my way of saying pay attention to what
basically is. I mean, if you look at the devotion of some of these people, it becomes beyond reason and more of a faith, if you really look at it.
Oh, there's not a question.
Because you can tell them all the reasonings, you could show them the truth, but the light shineth in darkness, but the darkness comprehendeth it not.
That's a really deep observation, because that was the point of my article and the little video, promoting it, was to shine that light and say, guys, there are things you're not thinking about. And by promoting this, you're at the same time promoting that government that you rightly label as tyrannical. You're promoting fidelity to fascism in your children. And it's like, if I could get them to realize that, just get that. It's kind of like, if you go to someone and preach the gospel. My goal in preaching to you is to fulfill the Great Commission, right, of the Lord.
Right.
That, as our friend Tyler Childers says, fit me for the Great Commission, right? That's what I do. I want to proclaim Christ and him crucified and resurrected to you. But if you accept him or not, that's your deal, and I'm fine either way. I'm going to love you the same. And so my thing is, conservatives, if you still, the day after you read the article, you want to send little Sally in to pledge her fidelity to tyrants, and you want to have her subtly reinforce in her mind an adherence to principles that run counter to our founding principles. If your lips draw nigh unto conservatism, but the Pledge of Allegiance is far from it.
Yeah.
That's fine if you want to do that. But the point is, I want you to at least acknowledge that this evidence that I've presented you is irrefutably sound. You may say the darkness comprehendeth it not, and that's very profound. But I would like to think that there'd be enough, well-intentioned conservatives to say, you know what, I never knew that stuff.
I don't doubt. I mean, there is an importance for sharing the truth as you see, as it is, with as many people as you can. But I think it's important to remember that we bind the testimony and seal the law, so to speak, amongst who? As the disciples of Jesus. Meaning, it's not so much as we should expect everyone to acknowledge or to see the things that we see, but we're out there to try to find people, disciples, spiritually speaking, who can see the light and see the truth for what it is. I think that's the important expectation that we should have. And not everyone's going to believe in the truth, but you share it enough so that it reaches the disciples' ears.
Can I add one thing to what you're saying?
And seal the law and binding the testimony. That's a very significant meaning of it in and of itself.
Yes. Go ahead, Mike.
I
want to look up something really quick.
I was, I think another aspect of this, which I think ties directly into what Connor's talking about, is, if we look at this from a continuation that goes back to Christ of the setting the people free, the abolition movement that goes through the abolition of slavery, that is an extension. And as conservatives, especially those who love Lincoln, if you see yourself as an extension of that movement that was dedicated to setting people free, then the abolition or the acknowledgement of the illegitimacy of the state is an extension of that same abolition movement. That again goes
that if they acknowledge the illegitimacy of the state, that goes with it a reframing of their entire religion. At least because I've come across people who are devout conservatives, and they attach with their political beliefs that it is somehow attached to their being of God, the identity of godliness. And if they acknowledge that the state is illegitimate, then
it has to start somewhere. In other words, there has to be kinks in the armor.
Right.
You've got to find the kinks in the armor.
But that's the difficulty.
But what about the realpolitik consideration? The fact that this bill passed the Arizona State House 31-29. That means one guy. If we have one Republican in the Arizona House of Representatives that reads that article and says, you know what, that's right. Do you realize you changed the world?
Right.
You changed the world, because there might be now a generation of kids who do not have that forced upon them, because there are only two ways: force and consent.
Yep.
And if you look,
see, and by the way, and that is a problem. I mean, that is a huge problem that there would be an actual law forcing people. I mean, that's North Korea kind of stuff, honestly. And I hate to be the guy to be like, hey, like I understand that we're not living like we're living like in North Korea. I get that, but it's that kind of force, Joey, where the legislator is saying, you will comply. We're going to take your free agency away from you, and you will pledge allegiance to me. Because that's what basically they're saying. I am pledging allegiance to the elite class that will make the power that will make these decisions for me. And that's not biblical. That's not Book of Mormon. That's not
under God. So.
Well, but yeah, by the way,
even that was added,
later,
right? That was added later.
We don't care about.
That's like an afterthought at best.
It was Republicans, right?
Right.
Republicans wanting to do, but the fact that they thought to aggregate something to the bloody Pledge of Allegiance,
right,
in the 50s, that's already showing that within 50 years it had become a sacrament to the conservatives.
Oh, who's the and I know you know what I'm talking about, the famous, I think he was a comedian.
Red Skelton.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Who does that, beautifully read, where everyone's in tears. And by the way, everything he says, that's half the things that he says isn't even in the pledge and is 100% wrong. but it's very nostalgic. There's nothing more powerful than nostalgia, by the way. That's just a powerful tool
but doesn't it come down, and this is the thing that I've discovered. Well, there's 2 points. First, it comes down to the fact that Americans nearly universally, I mean, with such rare exception, it's worthless to discuss it, are surrendering their children to the government to be taught that they do not know what they're being taught. They do not know who's doing the teaching, right? And they don't give a damn.
They don't care. I was with a student today.
Because guess what? Mommy needs time for her side hustle,
That's right.
right? Mommy needs her nap. Mommy
Maybe
needs
it's
time.
the false traditions we mentioned earlier.
I think it's beyond that. I don't think it's false traditions. I think it's sin.
Well, I mean,
I think it's flat out. I want my time. I had a.
Oh, it's
I
selfishness.
do not want to. I do not want to take on the responsibility of freedom.
Think
I mean,
of
the tradition
there's
is
a
sin.
bloody Christmas
You're
song.
right. Exactly.
There is a bloody Christmas song that says, "Mom and Dad can't wait for school to start again."
Right. Right.
Why? Because Mommy and Daddy need a break.
Right.
Then Mommy and Daddy shouldn't be Mommy and Daddy. Right? You don't buy a car,
Yeah.
and then drive it to a stranger and say, "Hey, fill it up with whatever you want to fill it up."
And
with.
then pretend like you can fix the
Right.
school system through like some board.
I'm gonna or
I mean, right.
do some board that agrees 99 all of whom send their kids to the same indoctrination camp. Also, like I've told you before, maybe you too, Connor, about my friend that I asked him, because this is back when I was doing videos a lot and being more, I guess, visible. And he's like, "Oh, I saw your video." And he's like, "I send my kids to school and I hate the things they're learning." I'm like, "Then why do you do it?" And he's like, "Well, when they come home, I deprogram them." No, you don't. I tell you what you do, sir. You bring them home. You maybe see them for 30 minutes. You tell them, do your homework, which makes them nothing more than indentured servants to their teachers.
Mhm.
Do your homework. So you've got 8 hours of school, 2-3 hours of homework.
and then what?
Then what?
Bed.
Then
What?
you've got lying in bed looking at a screen. You don't know what's on the screen.
Yep.
And frankly, you don't care. You will give lip service to caring because you know you should care. But if I asked you, tell me the last 10 sites your child visited, there's no way you could do it.
Right.
But a little tear would come down your face when I asked if they pledge allegiance every morning.
That's
How are we going to undo it? This is
the
the question to Daniel Webster, the discussion. Get us back. How do we undo it?
So I was just listening today, John Gatto.
Oh, yeah.
So, really famous educator,
Mhm.
totally anti-public
Yeah.
school, but his point is, and I want to get to like, how do we do it? But I think it's important. Part of the thing is just like it's important for people to know the history of the Pledge of Allegiance, the history of what the public school system is really an important thing that we're all Prussians now.
Well, right.
Make
America Prussia again. It's simply to make good soldiers and
That's
good
right.
factory workers to make things that will perpetuate war
Right.
and to make the state great. I mean, they admitted they wanted to reduce the influence of Christianity.
Yep. You have to. The most subversive thing ever in the universe is the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And those who believe that are sticking their thumb in the face of any tyrant who says, my will,
Well-
because it is Christ's will, and he overcame that tyrant.
If we're talking about, maybe the solution, our audience, are obviously people who are Christians.
Who are our audience?
Whoever listens to
we're
this,
Nameless throngs in the ether.
We're speaking as if we're talking to fellow
Yes.
Christians.
Mhm.
Maybe we need to reframe as best we can that concept. Maybe make them help them understand that if they believe in the divinity of Christ, then that means that by definition, you must be an enemy to tyrants, and maybe understanding what a tyrant is
Maybe we
and
need to
isn't.
somehow make more widely available your writings on this subject, Connor, because you are a very clear and persuasive writer, and I think
I've been thinking, we've been trying to fix Babylon, right? What is that scripture in Jeremiah? We've done I mean, it reminds me of another scripture too. That great abomination is bundled up so tightly no man can undo it. Right? Maybe we're trying to undo that terrible knot of power and authority and that institution which is rooted in every corner of the earth.
Yeah, you might be onto something, because I've actually suggested in other venues and other appearances that who cares what they do? Get thee out of Babylon, touch thee not the unclean thing. The education system is unclean and forever will be. And those who support it are supporters of Babylon, and we are commanded to not have conversation with those people. We are commanded to not have intercourse, meaning conversation, relationships with those people. Maybe it's a time now that we just say, we tried. Those of you who are convinced were convinced. Those of you who weren't, Jesus will be back and he will set us all straight. Maybe we were right. Maybe you were right. We'll find out very shortly, and we'll find out for good.
Yeah.
Literally for good.
I think.
And so it's like, you want to stay in Babylon, you want to send your kids to Babylon to school, knock yourself
But that
out.
does not discredit the responsibility for us and every Christian to, if we believe these things are true, which we do, in fact, I know these things are true, then that obligates us to try our best to bring as many people as we can.
Yeah, I just
Sure.
think there comes a time when the gathering is done.
Well,
Right, but that's not.
That's not for us to say.
I there's that great, the great, prayer that Christ gave, that N.T. Wright points out, thy kingdom come. We're not supposed to go to God's kingdom.
We don't go to heaven. Heaven comes to us.
We're supposed to make a place for heaven to come to us.
N.T. Wright, shout out to N.T. Wright. If
Amen.
you haven't read N.T. Wright, get yourself correct, because
Yeah.
that man, he's an Anglican prelate, but he is filled with the Spirit and filled
Wisdom.
with correct wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah. And that idea that like it's our role to bring the kingdom here in the best way that we know how. And the number one part of being the kingdom is realizing who's the king. And if we can be an example, it's kind of similar. Like what should in an ideal world, should America's role be in any European war? Well, America's role should be a beacon of light of freedom, so that people in Europe look at us and say, I want to be like that. We should not be sending our soldiers
whole
over there.
John Quincy Adams.
That's
Monsters
right.
To destroy.
We should just be that
I'm
beacon
going
of
to cheer
light.
you on, but I'm not going to send any of our blood and treasure to
Yep.
secure your liberty.
And in the same way, if we don't stand if we, do not, and our children do not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, people are going to ask questions, and we will become a peculiar people. And it's be important to know why we're not standing.
And that's something that I've also mentioned, and that I believe so strongly. And I obviously that's one of the things people don't know. Maybe you don't, promote yourself, but you walk the walk, man. You have kids, you walk the walk. You really do live the life that you believe and that you preach, right?
I try.
You're not a hypocrite. Right. Well, we all try. You're not a hypocrite.
I appreciate
You're
that.
not sitting here saying, we should homeschool. We shouldn't say the pledge. We should read the best books. We should follow Christ. And then going home and sitting here, you guys ready for school? Not doing that.
Right.
And so you have the authority of a true believer and someone who has the added authority of someone who is consistent. It's the word integrity from the Latin, right? You have integrity. That which you believe and that which you do are one, are integral, right? that's a big deal. And so your
Appreciate that,
work,
man.
people, yeah, and you have, the And If Love Remains podcast that is, I mean, you should be more famous than Joe Rogan because there's never any rubbish with you, But the point I'm making is, we have Mike, who is a dad and who is a husband and who is a Christian and who tries to carry on day in, day out a walk with Christ. Yes, insufficient and not perfect by any means.
By his grace. That's right, man. Amen.
Right. By his grace. And then you have Connor, someone who's, how old are you, Connor? 22? 23. Who has written.
What an old man.
Yeah, I know, right? at 23 years old, it reminds me of what's his name? Cesare Beccaria, who wrote on Crimes and Punishments, age 26, and never wrote anything else.
Right.
Why would you? Go out on top, Cesare, And so it's like Connor has written a few things, a couple of things. And is it the latest one is the one about, what did you call it?
On Power and Authority.
On Power and Authority. It's powerful. It's persuasive to Jeffersonian degrees.
Wow.
And what I'm trying to say is these aren't just talking heads. These aren't just people with opinions. These are people with the bona fides to back up.
Well, and I'm not saying this just to pass the compliment on, but I mean, you're definitely in that same boat of a guy who has been preaching this from, as long as I've ever known you, and much longer than that, who has written countless articles, who has written books and persuaded many, many hundreds, if not thousands of people in the ways of freedom. And your legacy, my friend, is deeper than than any of us will know. But there will be grandchildren that won't understand that the gift that they received from their mothers and their grandmothers is because of you.
Well, that's inshallah. But I just get tongue tied. It's what one of my students, Victoria, used to say, if we want to shut you up, all we have to do is compliment you. Because I do have that Quaker streak in me that's a mile wide, and I don't like
Well,
it.
just know that's the feeling here, brother.
I believe you, brother. I really believe you, and I'm grateful for that. And I don't care if anyone ever knew my name. That seems so silly and selfish and conceited. But if there were people that, I'll tell you frankly, when you say things, and it's been a couple of times lately, you and our mutual friend Alan Joaquim, he told me, and he's like, everything I believe about the Constitution, about this country, about liberty, I learned from you. And you've said that about things, and I'm like,
right.
That's a great thing, but of course, he who has not the Spirit shall not teach. I give, as did our Savior, emulating him, I give all credit to that, to our Heavenly Father. I do nothing save I saw my Father do it. And, I have a belief that these things are timeless and true, and that we as, it becomes every man who's been warned to warn his neighbor. And I want that's the essence of everything, because people will say, oh, why aren't you more famous? And why? Because I don't care about, and people who are famous care about being famous.
Right.
And I care about restoring liberty, because when, if you can take a child and you can convince him that of the true principles of liberty, of the timelessness, of the holiness of them, and that child grows up and has a child, well, that child, the child of your student will be raised from the cradle to believe these things, and you will have that generation, right? Like Sydney talks about, that generation who's hid and unregarded. Nobody knows their names. Nobody knows your kids' names. Your kids aren't famous, right? But your children are going to have children who pull down the tyrant's playhouse.
There's that 2 quick points, maybe not that quick, but I'll try. One is it reminds me so much of the end of That Hideous Strength, when the group at St. Anne, when everything is done and God has done his will and the town is pulled down and it's time for a new growth again. And the people of St. Anne who have had this major victory look at each other and they say, well, we didn't do much but like grow vegetables and wander around the town. And the Pendragon says, you did what was required. You did what God asked you to do. And you did exactly what you needed to do. And, this is us growing vegetables and wandering around the village a little bit,
Absolutely. But it's critical that everyone discover the gifts God has given him so that each of us can contribute in the way that best builds Zion, that best builds a society of men who are committed to the principles of liberty and the principles of Christian
and
of Christian living.
And Zion is an important word, I think. And that goes back to my second point, which is, it's an interesting take on why there's so much written in the New Testament about the trial of Christ. Why do we know so much about it? Like what was said, what he said. And there's this really interesting exchange that we all know of, but it kind of applies to this Pledge of Allegiance thing where he's standing before Caesar and he says in Caesar's or between a Pilate and says, are you a king? And Christ says, my kingdom is not of this world. And I think we need to be the legacy of that our kingdom, thy kingdom come. It is not of this world. Christ is king. And he set that example from the very beginning. He paid no tribute. Render under Caesar's, which is Caesar's.
That's such an important point, Mike. He never paid tribute to the Jewish establishment. He never paid taxes to Rome. What did he say when Peter said, hey, how do we go look at a fish and get it out of his mouth? That's how much disdain he had.
That's right.
I don't know, pay it. I don't care. Christ never, ever bowed to neither the Roman authority
he cleansed the temple
nor the Jewish authority.
Yep.
Why was he quiet at his trial? Because it was illegitimate, and he was not going to legitimize it by his participation.
But know you not that I can crucify thee.
Okay. You destroy this temple in 3 days, I'll raise it up.
Right.
And that's the thing, guys. I mean, I want to look at this. I love obviously talking about principle and talking about the meaning of these things. But the realpolitik, I come back to that. We only need to convince one Republican.
That's right. Well, right? And so one way, like I said, I mean, it wasn't long ago. I was that one Republican.
And me.
And you.
And
right?
So was I, right? I voted for George H.W. Bush, for George W. Bush. I was a good little Republican.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so you're right. Like it's one heart, one soul. And I think we have opportunities if we take it. If we, with the pandemic, I think 2 opportunities right now are very clear. Exercising the idea of how illegitimate the government was when it came to the pandemic. It was absolutely insane, the role that they played. And pointing that out over and over again, I think is an important thing to do because it reminds people that they were stuck in their homes, that their kids now have mental illness, that the suicide rate is up. All these terrible things happen because of the government, because of a government that seized control with no authority.
Okay, I wanted to look really quickly.
Yeah.
Because the House already passed it. So for me to say, but the Arizona Senate, which is about to take up this bill, 30 senators split 16-14. So if this bill passes along party lines, it will pass 16-14. and we'll go to the governor.
Maybe there's a blessing for Governor Hobbs, that we have Governor Hobbs right now.
I don't think she would take that stance, right? I don't.
You don't think she would veto it?
No, I don't think she would. She fancies herself independent and
Okay.
post-partisan.
I mean, here's where I would like, okay, maybe there's a reason why God put Hobbs.
But I mean, I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
so the president of the Senate is Warren Peterson.
Yeah.
I know
I know
him
Warren.
personally. You know him. Connor, you know him. Could we not, one senator blocks that and say, Warren, man, I know you're a good guy. I know you are a friend of liberty. I just please read this.
Yeah.
Just please. Because so now thinking of this, it just came into my head. It was like, contact Warren. So I'm going to email Warren and say, Warren, this is an article I wrote about this bill y'all are fixing to vote on. Because I think they're voting on it tomorrow.
You know what? I'm going to look that up. I'll send it to him. I'm Facebook friends with him. I'll definitely send that over to him.
Yeah. Well, I'm not on Facebook anymore. Dang it. But I can send him an email.
Yeah, and I'll send it to him on Facebook. We'll get it to him.
And just say, brother, look, this is not me trying to be an activist.
Right.
Right. This is me trying to offer you an opportunity to genuinely be a leader.
Right.
You're the president of the Senate. Preside by saying, you know what, guys? Because even if he votes in favor of it, we will know that he knew better.
Yeah. And
saying that to him, say, Warren, you might still vote in favor because you might feel political pressure to do so. But at that moment that I look at the vote and I see you vote, I'll go down to the bloody chamber to watch them vote. The moment I see you hit that green button, I'll know that you did something wrong.
Right. Because there's no as rose-colored glasses as it seems, there is no justification for a bill like that. Zero.
No.
There's zero justification.
It's posturing.
Yeah.
It's we love America more than you do.
Exactly.
We're
gonna force everybody else to love them whether they like it or not.
Right. Well, wasn't that the devil's plan? Forced charity.
Yep.
It's like that quotation that Ezra Taft Benson, people get down here and they forget how they voted in the war in heaven.
Right.
Right. In heaven, you voted. Jesus is like, I'm going to lose some of y'all, but those of you who get back here, you definitely deserved it because you chose. You exercised your agency righteously and you chose to live this life. Those of you who are lost, you'll be lost because you used your agency contrary-wise. But you have Satan, who in the Bible makes it clear, I won't lose any of you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, isn't that what this is? Say the Pledge of Allegiance and you'll be, is it good to be patriotic? Yes. Say the Pledge of Allegiance and you'll be patriotic. So I'm going to make you say the Pledge of Allegiance because it leads to patriotism.
Right.
That is 100%
at the
heel
point
to toe
of the gun,
satanic.
At the point of a gun, I am going to make your child.
An idea so good I had to force you to do it.
Right. Yeah.
Right? An idea so good I had to force you to do it. And I think that the position that we're in of being actual friends, personal friends with Warren, and him being the president of the Arizona Senate, that in days will take up this matter.
Yeah.
And say, brother, what sayest thou?
Mm-hmm.
Choose ye this day. But mark, like Cicero said, mark every man in his brow how he feels about this republic. Because the day's going to come, we're going to have to separate me from thee.
Right.
And you voting for this, knowing that you're voting for something written by a socialist for the simple purpose of increasing the income of a socialist organization, espousing principles contrary to those held dear by our founding fathers. You do that, then you are knowingly behaving satanically.
Yeah. I think that case has got to be made. And it is interesting that the three of us are in kind of a unique position.
I want to see. Let's see. I'm going to look up real quick. Y'all talk amongst
I wonder.
yourselves.
Yeah, and I'm also now I need to look up and see who our state senator representative is. You know,
Who your particular
Yeah.
senator is?
because I guarantee you where I live, it's going to be a Republican.
So let's see.
You
It
know?
passed the House on the 21st. It is, yeah, just, so it was assigned to the Senate Education Committee and the Rules Committee. It was read today for the second time, so it has to be 3 readings. So I'm sure they'll accomplish the 3rd reading tomorrow. And then I imagine it will go for a vote in the next couple of days to the whole Senate. It'll go to a vote in the next couple of days. So, and then at that point, so yeah, I would say right now we're looking at it says pending action right now is the Senate Ed Committee.
Well,
just
time to red tip a horn, I guess.
well played.
There's a deep cut for many.
Yeah, that is a deep cut. You know what? I'll tell you what, a deep cut on another subject. Just funny. And I should send it to you guys because no one gets it. Years and years ago, I think it was 2001 maybe. I wrote these things that I thought would be funny T-shirts and bumper stickers. And one of them was, "Don't blame me, I voted for Pecumini." And I showed these to, members of the church, and they're just like, "I don't get it." Like it was something like Curalam tastes like chicken. It was Alma the Younger, like gone but not forgotten or something. Just all of these things that were like really, I didn't think they were deep cuts until my cousin, she read them and she's like, "Dude, they're deep cuts." And I'm like, "Nah, I don't think so." But I should send them to you to see what you think, because I'm like, literally no one thinks they're funny but me. And I read them and I'm like, "Dude, Curalam tastes like chicken. That's hilarious. Don't blame me, I voted for Pecumini." That's a deep cut, dude.
That is a deep cut. That's too deep for me. I'm gonna have to look that up now.
But I'm just saying, it's just about when you said that about, let me make sure an email before.
That's good stuff.
Well, I've written him in the past, and he says
Brother Peter, Senator Peterson.
I've written to Senator Peterson.
Yeah, he doesn't like my stuff either, although he's respectful generally.
Yeah,
he's
is.
respectful. And I think in this case, it's one of those things like, you and I both know this is political theater,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because what percentage of those kids are doing that anyway?
Right.
90, right? 90% of those kids are doing it anyway.
But which makes this an easy.
It's a layup.
Yeah. But it's also a layup to take a stand. Like,
You would think.
it's not a.
But it's such a sacrament that I'm sure Warren is like, this ain't the hill I'm dying on.
You're probably right. But man, it's. I don't know. It seems so silly. Like, because the consequences are this. It's, and the slippery slope argument is used so often, but it's only because it's true.
Right.
If you're going to allow, or if you're going to force kids to do one thing, I guess we forced them to wear a mask. I guess we forced them to, it's just, I'm out of words about this.
There is
just,
nothing
wow.
of consent in the system at all.
None.
When a bell rings, you sit. When a bell rings, you rise. When a bell rings, you sit with strangers. You do what that teacher says. It's like that Adam Smith thing.
Right.
The system was created for the benefit and ease of the teachers and the administration, not for the students at all. I mean, that's Adam Smith in 1776 saying that. For those of you conservatives out there, I love Adam Smith and Wealth of Nations. It's one of my favorite books. You've never read it. Cop to the fact you've never read it.
Because that's in there.
Yeah. Second, go look up that I just said, that the entire system of education exists for the benefit. And he says in there, even if the teacher, I'm paraphrasing, but even if the teacher is rubbish, The students are forced to respect them. Don't talk back to me. Why? What you just said is completely ridiculous. I have authority over you. Oh, well, okay then.
My bad.
My bad.
Carry on.
Well,
Sorry.
that's why, for as much as I, disagree with Prager on many things, it's pretty funny. I think the one thing he has got right is the kids that get the most out of college are the ones that went through college drunk.
No, that's deep. That's deep and true.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, that's anybody that goes to college. What? Okay, man. I mean, I guess it's like it was at the time of the founding. If you want to go to college to be a lawyer or a doctor or a preacher of some sort that requires, knock yourself out.
Well, at the
But
time
how
of the
many-
founding, they didn't require it.
Well, no, but I'm saying if you
Yeah.
went to university, you didn't just go to university because you were 18.
Right.
You went to university because you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a preacher, right? That's why you went to university. Today, it's like you just go to college because you're 18. Your parents dropped you off there, basically.
It's
If you
true.
don't, then
You don't get a job.
Yeah. If you haven't complied with the rules that we've laid out for you, the track that we have laid out so clearly
I'm
from
gonna pull up that Adam
kindergarten,
Smith quote because it's so powerful.
and because it is interesting, and we are seeing more and more people into their 40s and 50s that are still in college getting master's degrees, getting even undergraduate degrees, and God bless them, they're learning
Really?
whatever.
God bless them?
Well, they think they're improving their lives. So I hope they improve their lives. And honestly, it's better for somebody who's lived a life and can hopefully see through some of the rubbish in college than an 18-year-old kid that hasn't lived and is, basically it's being force fed to them. Either way, it's a bad deal. It's a bad deal that so many jobs require an additional 4 to 8 years of indoctrination. It's a bad deal, and
But often it's required because of federal regulation,
It's very true.
insurance, and occupational licensing. Right?
Nothing like getting permission from the government to pursue your happiness, right?
Right. So here's Adam Smith from The Wealth of Nations, the book all you conservatives have read back and forth. The discipline of college, it's now college he would refer to as high school. The discipline of colleges and universities is in general contrived not for the benefit of the students, but for the interest, or more properly speaking, for the ease of the teachers. Its object is in all cases to maintain the authority of the master, and whether he neglects or performs his duty, to oblige the student in all cases to behave to him as if he had performed it with the greatest diligence and ability. It seems to presume perfect wisdom and virtue in the one order, teachers, and the greatest weakness and folly in the other. Where the masters, however, really perform their duty, there are no examples, I believe, that the greater part of the students ever neglect theirs. You wonder why we have such terrible student bodies? Look at the teachers. I mean, think of what he just said. Where the masters really perform where the teachers really do what they're supposed to do, the students will not neglect to do what they're supposed to do. And here's the phrase that pays. No discipline is ever requisite to force attendance upon lectures which are really worth attending. If
Amen.
that school was doing anything worthwhile, kids would beg to go. Parents would have nothing bad to say. Kids would beg to stay in school. And I've seen it, and this isn't self-serving, but I've seen that time in class where the kids are like, no, I just want to stay.
Right.
We had an hour and a half class in Heritage, and there were times the kids were like, no, let's just stay and keep
Yep.
going.
I did that.
Lots of them were like, let's just stay and keep going. right? And I'm
I got in
not
trouble for
attributing that to me. I'm attributing that to the material.
Well, here's the thing, and we are like, what makes humans great? One of the things that makes humans great is our ability to adapt and learn.
Oh, I was going to say Abraham Lincoln.
No, and see, there you go.
Abrahamus Maximus, if you dare blaspheme his name.
But he's
the great emancipator. He freed the bloody slaves, Mike, you neo-Confederate.
Just call me John Brown.
Oh, that could be worse.
Right?
Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay.
I came not to bury Lincoln, but to praise him. It's Shakespeare.
It is Shakespeare.
But Caesar, not Lincoln. But little difference. Both of them murdered a lot of people.
They both crossed, some boundary,
Rubicon.
right?
That Rubicon was like, think about, dude, Caesar and Lincoln.
Yeah, I was reading Thomas Gordon's translation or commentaries on Sallust, and it's like, oh, wasn't this the quote unquote Civil War?
Oh, read Lucan. Read Lucan, the Roman historian Lucan, on the Roman Civil War, and you're like, that's the thing. And that's why I'm saying these kids would get excited about, not because of me, I'm literally nobody, but the material that they've never been exposed to. It's like, dude, this is so amazing. Right. But you ain't going to read Lucan in high school unless you're my student.
Well, as Steven said, it's not often the only place where Sydney's heard is in Joey Wolverton's class.
No one's ever heard of Sydney unless they heard it from Wolverton.
Which is a sad truth.
Well, you know what? I thought about this the other night when it was Richard Price's birthday. It was his 300th birthday. And I bet I was the only person on earth, other than maybe his descendants, who took note. But he is...
You're giving his descendants a lot of credit, like they know who they are.
Well, I would hope. But that's true. Anyway, I'll leave that story out. But that's true. But Richard Price, he yet lives because of the resurrection of our Savior. He yet lives. And there's somewhere, I guarantee you, he was like, thank you, man.
Okay,
he did a lot.
I plan on putting this out, so I want you to give a quick 2-minute summary of Price and why we should know who he is.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I will just say, if you go to the New American, and look and just,
I'll put a link in the description.
Right, and my name. There's an article out there, "Happy Birthday, Richard Price," and then the title I gave it was "Wait, who?" And
they said Richard Branson. Sorry,
Richard Branson. Richard Price. This guy was, first of all, he was a Welsh preacher, a dissenter, which right there, I already love him. He's a dissenter. I already love him. But he was a guy that he was so influential, so revered and respected and admired by our founding fathers. They offered him citizenship. They offered him a farm and a salary to come and live in him. And he demurred, saying, I need to stay and work on the liberty of my own country. But he was a personal friend of John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Richard Henry Lee, a personal friend of these guys. And I'm telling you, he was one of those ones every year when I would teach the Founder's Recipe that everybody loved, because he's very plain in his language. One of our famous or infamous, if you ask the Heritage Administration, infamous factious and discontented T-shirts had a quotation from Richard Price, which was, "Knowledge without virtue makes clever devils." Right? If you're smart without being virtuous, you're just a devil.
Yeah, I think you just described Chat GPT there.
Right. Well, but so Richard Price, he said to enlighten a people is to elevate them.
That's good stuff.
You know, I'm just telling you, read the quotations that I put in that article. But this is a guy who, and he's talking in 1784 about the state of education in Britain. And you're like, 1784? They're there to do nothing but make their minds narrow, to infect them with wicked prejudices that will keep them from being able to believe the truth when it's taught to them. Yeah, if you don't know Richard Price right now, go look up my article, thenewamerican.com, and just Google Joe Wolverton, Richard Price. It ain't like you're going to have a bunch of articles on Richard Price. But Google that, read my article on Richard Price, and then go to the online Library of Liberty and read for yourself Richard Price's sermons. He is a man among men who rightly was so often quoted by our founding fathers.
And would have preached against the Pledge of Allegiance 100%.
Oh, Richard, are you kidding me? Read his section on patriotism, because he talks about he has a whole sermon on the love of our country. Now he's talking about his country being England. Read it. On the love of our country. I told you, I think I told you the story. It was one of my students, she had Richard Price. Her name was Victoria. What's up, Victoria, little buddy? She had Richard Price, and I would ask them to have a debate on something they read, and that the student would lead the debate. I would just sit back and enjoy it. And her question was, can you be too patriotic? So we would do Oxford style and say, okay, how many of y'all right now would vote it's possible to be too patriotic? You'd have lots of people.
Mm-hmm.
At the end, how many of y'all think it's possible? Nobody, because you learn from Richard Price what patriotism really is. Dude, Richard Price, I seriously can't get enough of that guy. He's up there with Sidney, Trenchard, and Gordon. Yeah. He's up there with those guys for sure. And just a humble Welsh preacher who, again, endowed by our Creator with a great gift, and one that, if things were like they were, his name would still be taught to children today.
There are people, and Richard Price being one. I mean, the people that you talk about, especially in your founders class, that just have a unique vision to see clearly, like to distill it right down to what the problem is, or what what liberty is, and why it's important, and what are the steps that are going to take that liberty away. They saw it so clearly, and
why did they see it clearly? Because they studied history.
Yeah,
and they knew of the value of virtue. I mean, saying knowledge without virtue makes devils.
That's a powerful thing, man.
I'm going to pull up some Richard Price out of the Founder's Recipe book. Not to be, again, that's not self-serving. It's just that's the way I'm most easily.
I won't be self-serving. I'll just say, go buy his book. Go to Amazon, get the book. It's awesome, and you'll have your education will be all the greater for it.
But just to read from his word, because yes, I have accurately quoted some of it, but I think to have his precise words is important, particularly given the fact that it was just his birthday. So, the little call out quote that I use, the so-called commonplace book quote, our gratitude, if genuine, will be accompanied with endeavors to give stability to the deliverance our country has obtained. So if you really are grateful for our founding fathers, then you're going to demonstrate endeavors to give stability to that which they gave us. And the Pledge of Allegiance undermines what they gave us. So education will cause future generations to grow up virtuous and happy, and accelerate human improvement to a greater degree than can be at present imagined. The purpose of education is to direct the powers of the mind in unfolding themselves and to assist them in gaining their just bent and force. And in order to do this, its business should be to teach how to think rather than what to think. But hitherto, now this is in 1784, education has been conducted on a contrary plan. It has been a contraction, not an enlargement of their intellectual capacity. It has been an injection of false principles, hardening them in error, not a discipline enlightening and improving them. Instead of opening and strengthening the students and teaching them to think freely, it has cramped and enslaved them and qualified them for thinking only in one track. Instead of instilling humility, charity, and liberality, and thus preparing them for an easier discovery and a readier admission of truth,
So is that how you?
it has inflated them with conceit and stuffed their minds with wretched prejudices.
Well, there's the how. A love of virtue and charity and humility.
Liberality. Do what you want to do.
What teaches those things?
The gospel of Jesus Christ, right? But I don't even care if that, I mean,
It doesn't have to be any good truth can teach that.
right. Bring all truth into Zion and let it be encompassed in one great whole, you know. And that's 1784. You know, that was the thing. I remember there was a student, you know, you always have, I didn't have many. I had maybe 2 or 3 of those students that wanted to be the one that hated me,
Okay.
you know, and that's fine. I you know, it wasn't my plan to be beloved. But you would have this, and this one student, he said to me, "You just want everyone to think like you." And I'm like, "No, I just want everyone to think.
Right.
I don't want you to think like me. I just don't want you to regurgitate what you've heard," you know, because he was complaining that we had some debate in class and everybody was siding with me. And I'm like, if you think contrary-wise, tell us, defend it, persuade people.
Right.
No, you just want everybody to think like you. I really don't. If you could persuade someone to agree with you and disagree with me, that'd be fine with me. You know, but that doesn't happen. But you see there, doesn't the Pledge of Allegiance cramp them, make them think in only one track?
Yes. I mean, yes, by design.
By the very design, it was meant to subtly indoctrinate school children into the belief in socialism.
And if you take it one step farther, look at how people will react to those who will not comply or who will react negatively against it, and how that directly affects people's virtue.
Yeah, I mean, how would, you know, because if this bill passes into law, then a child who genuinely feels compunction at repeating some socialist screed, being forced to do so by the government, that child will be in danger of the council, as our Savior would have said.
Yeah.
You know, you will literally be in danger of the council, meaning you will be, officialdom will punish you in some way. I mean, that's just the truth of it. If this becomes the law, giant air quotes around that, because it's tyranny no matter how you slice it, but people
Right.
will call it the law because they don't think that word has
Fancy the word.
Yeah, they do. It makes them feel good. Oh, it's a law. It's
Right.
the law.
That sounds fun.
It was
Law
passed.
sounds
That sounds
It
fancy.
came from a bill on
And
Capitol
valid.
Hill.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, seriously, if it becomes the law, then kids who are open-minded, who are taught to think, you know, how to think, who aren't cramped and enslaved, who don't have their heads stuffed with wretched prejudices, will be held accountable.
There's a real, how do I say this? There's a real issue with people think that they've got it all figured out already.
That's in that, you're talking about the Thomas Gordon. It was Thomas Gordon's, or was it John Trenchard? Thomas
What?
Gordon. The essays on Sallust.
Oh, yeah, that was Thomas Gordon.
Yeah, Gordon. Essays on Sallust. That's something he mentioned in at the beginning of one of his essays. He says, people are they're so defensive of what they've been taught.
Right. Was it you that we were just talking about
I
the
think
other
it's
day?
because of the character,
The
they
first thing
love
that you
the
learned.
character of what teaches them. Or
Well,
also-
they become so, this is what I was taught, and if I was taught it, it must be true, right? Because no way my parents would ever submit me to be taught
Right.
lies.
And
they trust the source.
right. And because of the traditions of men, it is assumed you send your kid to school and they will be treated and taught in the ways that they need to be taught. Like it's the professionals that are doing it. And so my point is, it would take, and I know they're out there. So like, this isn't a defeatist point of view, but it is, I think, a reality that it is a rare student who will go to a school. It will take a rebellious heart, which we need a little bit more of, for a student to say, I don't know about, I feel weird about this, stating my allegiance to.
With my hand on my salute.
Right.
I mean, do you even know the history of the salute of the flag?
I don't.
With the Pledge of... Well, Google it. Originally, it was known as the Roman salute, which
Uh-oh.
became the Nazi salute. So you look at photos from the 20s and the early 30s of kids in classrooms doing the Pledge of Allegiance. They're doing what we would call the Nazi salute, what they called the Roman salute. And then it was like, well, we can't do that because the Nazis do it. So let's put your hand on your heart. But at the beginning, it was that. I mean, I think if we had more pictures of that, maybe people would say, yeah, that's because Nazi is a word that has a bad taste in everybody's mouth. Rightly so. Don't at me. Rightly so. Nazi has a bad taste. But if we showed, kids doing the Roman salute.
to the American
National
flag.
Socialism.
Don't. Everybody likes to focus on the socialism part, not on the nationalism part of that.
Right.
I remember teaching that in school when I taught World War II, and people's eyes just like, what? I'm like, all I'm saying is.
Yeah. Well, and that's the, that again, that's why I love the love. And again, I'm going to go to big principle because that's what I got. That's where I have to go. And that's the, I love the Gospels because it's such a subversion. It's such a, here's the great, and N.T. Wright talks about this again. Here's the great Caesar out there conquering the land, and here's the new Caesar, and these are all the great things that Caesar's going to do for you. And then here comes Luke. There was a babe in Bethlehem, and he conquered the world.
That's exactly right. And that if only we had more people, and like you said, it doesn't have to be necessarily the gospel of Jesus Christ, much less the restored gospel of Jesus Christ.
Right.
But just the principle of what does it mean to be educated? What is educate? What does that mean in Latin? Nobody knows. You ask an educator, what does educate mean? What's its Latin root? It means to lead out of the darkness into the light, to walk you up
You step out
Mount
of Plato's
Parnassus,
cave.
to walk up Mount Parnassus, right? So
Yeah.
you can go to the oracle, so you can see things differently than the people down in the valley. But Cicero has a really good thing where he's like, yeah, but you start climbing and it gets kind of hard, and you're going to have these sirens, these people who tell you, oh, you've climbed far enough. He said they will seduce you. The word he uses, seduce, which means what? To lead away.
Yeah.
Seducare, right? As opposed to educare, to lead you away.
I didn't know that. That's so good.
Yeah.
And you can make
Educate-
comparisons with that with
Good.
you're going to climb that hill and then look about you and see the glory of the world.
Don't you look at my kingdom? Don't you want it? Right? Isn't this what you want? Or you've climbed high enough, man. Come on. What are you gonna, what's a little few extra feet gonna matter?
By the way, that is so powerful. I'm
to
sorry.
educate and
I'm
seduce?
totally stuck on that for a minute because the idea that those two words like are
Yeah, seduce
are
is
the
literally
same.
the Latin
The
opposite of
opposite.
educate.
that's just beautiful, man. That's just man. You learn something new every day. That's
Well, you ought to, right? You ought to learn. I mean, that's people are like, "What books are you reading?" I'm like, "What books am I not reading?"
right.
You know, I'm not reading the books you're reading, but I like every year I reread all the founders' books. This year it's going to be hard because I have to read them online because I'm obviously, not surrounded by all my books. But it's like, that's what why do you go? Because why, if you found a well with sweet water, why would you go to any other well? Particularly when that well is close, that well is deep, that well is available. Why would you go in search of other wells?
See, that goes back to the point that you were making. Like, we because we're all believers here, but it doesn't have to be the gospel of Christ. There is so many wonderful writings like Richard Price, like the people that you espouse, the Chester and Gordon people, all these people that have written such beautiful and
but
deep,
that are never taught. I mean, that's the whole point.
right.
Nobody knows any of them.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, most people barely know the Federalist Papers, let alone the Anti-Federalist Papers.
They know the name.
Right. Right.
Because when I quote the Federalist, you know how people just shut up? When
Oh, yeah.
I quoted it in my article about the Pledge of Allegiance, where Madison says this is a confederation of independent sovereign states, not a national constitution. Huh? Where does it say that? Federalist Papers. Oh. Well, that sucks because I'm a conservative and I love the Federalist Papers.
Must be an anomaly.
Must have been that
Just that one
that
maverick piece.
that Hamilton P.
I mean, but Hamilton says it too.
Well, that's because
No.
I mean, Hamilton,
Hamilton
I
was
wouldn't give
the great, like,
yeah.
he knew which side to be on when he needed to be on that
definitely,
side.
He definitely,
He played the game.
he did. He played the game and he played it well.
And now there's a musical about him.
Right. Well, but what is 3/4 of that musical about? His adultery.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I love some of the songs in Hamilton. They're awesome. But most of that play is about him committing adultery. Well, Madison didn't do that. You're not going to get a Madison play. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're not going to get it. Madison had a
The
much
gentle
more
character of
yeah,
Madison.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's rap about him.
Let's rap about
Let's rap about little Jimmy
let's get that hip hop going.
in West Philadelphia.
Born and raised.
Well, I don't know, in West Orange, Virginia. On
Oh,
Mount Pelier. Well, he wasn't really born at Mount Pelier. So I'm trying to look. I want to see if I included that Cicero quote about seduction in the founder's recipe. I don't remember if I did, so I'm gonna look that up.
okay. Yeah, that was a mind blower for me, because I'm just a dumb musician, man. But it's wild, like, to think. You talk about Babylon, Rome, like we're living in the days of
Yeah, here it is on the
Caesar.
Republic. I did it. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I'm glad you did, because I
But
was
here it is.
scrambling.
It's from on the Republic. It's from on the Republic, or on the Commonwealth, as you might find it called, which means the same thing. You understand? Commonwealth is an English word for res publica, the wealth of the people, the thing of the people, the people's business. Commonwealth was simply an English translation for the word res publica, which some people call republic, which is fine. But anyway, that's in case you find. I don't find on the Republic. I can only find on the Commonwealth.
Same thing.
Same thing, man. Same dang thing. Kangs do Kang things. You remember that? You remember that quote?
Kings do kings.
Kings do king things. That was LeBron James. He's like, kings do king things.
Well,
LeBron, what do you do when you're off the court? Kings do king things, my man.
well, he's speaking the truth there.
You speak the truth. All right. So he writes. So Cicero. So this is around, I don't know, 45-ish, 43 BC, right before the tyrant had him assassinated. Nor is it sufficient to possess this virtue as an art unless we practice it. An art indeed, though not exercised, may still be retained in knowledge, but the existence of virtue depends entirely on its continued use. You can always know something, but to remain virtuous, you got to continue doing virtuous things.
It's a perishable skill.
Thing, right? But isn't that exactly what Richard Price just said?
Yep.
1,800 years later.
Right.
Well, maybe he read Cicero.
Oh, come on.
He did not.
He wasn't in his
No.
textbook. Cicero wasn't in his textbook. I'm sorry. Cicero for all my heritage educated.
Yeah,
Latin.
Kikero. Yeah,
You know, because you really learned Latin at heritage. Cicero. So Xenocrates, one of the sublimest philosophers, when someone asked him what his disciples learned, he replied, they do what his disciples learned. He replied, they do of their own free will what they otherwise would be compelled to do by law. Boom. If it's a good thing, they're going to do it. They don't need the law to compel them.
That's right.
An idea so good, you had to be forced to do it. Brought to you by the Pledge of Allegiance. And since we feel an urge to seek this blessing, the improvement of all mankind, by the spur of nature herself, let us carry out this glorious endeavor, always so dear to the best men, and not listen for a moment to the seductions of those who sound retreat so loudly that they sometimes manage to call back the people who've already made considerable improvement in virtue.
Wow.
That's my man, Kikero.
Kikero.
Old chickpea nose.
We need some hummus, baby.
Yeah. Or as the founders called him, Tully. If you ever read the founders, they call him. They typically don't call him Cicero. They call him, because Cicero was not his surname, right? Tullius or Tully was Mark Tully. If he lived today, his name would be Mark Tully.
That's crazy.
It'd be harder to, like, as Mark Tully once said, you'd be like, Cicero? Yes.
We listened to Cicero.
You listened to him?
No, we listened to.
Oh, we will listen to a guy named Cicero. A guy named Mark Tully? Come on now. Come on. But, I mean, that's the thing. If we're seeking the best of all men, let us carry out this glorious endeavor and not listen to the seductions of those who sound retreat so loudly they sometimes call back the people who've already made
But Joey,
considerable improvement.
Joey, the most important thing for this country to do is to keep Ukraine free. Don't you know this? That is the most important thing.
I identify as Ukrainian. I mean, I was born in the United States.
I can't wait to see those Biden bucks coming in your bank account.
Yeah, exactly. I'm identifying as a Eastern European country trying to qualify for NATO membership.
Right.
I just want the money. I'm going to make movies of the Russians bombing me. And I just want the money.
And if you could blow up a pipeline for me, I'd be grateful.
Allegedly.
Okay.
Citizen. Come on, citizen.
Okay. Sorry.
Come on, man.
But what I think is funny is now when I did that video the other day about that series of video about thing that would make the conservative sacred cows that would make the founding fathers, go into a coma. One of them was support for Ukraine. And I got all these conservatives. Conservatives don't support that. Dude, you voted to give him a bust of the president of Ukraine in the Capitol.
Wow.
What do you mean we don't support this? All of a sudden.
Well, what did the Republicans, the opposition party say? The most important thing for us to do is to support Ukraine. not who cares about this,
Well, now they
East
oppose it
Palestine
because
thing.
Biden is all about it.
Right.
But now, right? It's the whole thing about,
Democrats
the
bad,
right?
Republicans
The
good.
Pufendorf thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like we carry more. What was the exact quote? We don't follow the dictates of reason. We simply try to support. How did he say it? Hold on, talk again. Man,
What do we
quoted that
support,
so
Connor?
many
Come on,
times.
you know this quote.
I've quoted that so many times. To sit here and be like,
I've been deep in thought in my own head.
You're
So
deep in thought.
Oh, what are you thinking about?
just the whole conversation, really.
Oh,
The price of tea
I mean,
in China?
we are deep. It's true. I mean, deep in yes, we're deep.
My dad used to say that's why my eyes were brown.
Yeah, I'm reviewing our whole conversation, just thinking.
And you're
about
wanting to have Mike cut your part
I
out.
know, he's like,
He's like, I don't want to be associated
wanna
with
be
this.
associated
Can
with
you
this
please
podcast?"
delete my audio? Because none of this I agree with. I do not endorse the weirdness that was going on.
Excuse me while I say the Pledge of Allegiance.
That if Connor said the Pledge of Allegiance, I would know that
something's
he was
wrong.
now in the Illuminati.
Can I say,
Someone asked today if the Illuminati was a real thing. I'm like, are you kidding me?
dude?
Of course it's. I mean, but not like ironically a real thing. There was an actual,
It's a-
Weishaupt created a thing called the Illuminati.
Right.
Like that's a historical fact, bro. Not just like Jay-Z's in the Illuminati. I saw him on the Grammys throwing up a diamond. What? He had his fingers in the shape of
triangle.
a diamond. What? Yeah, man. He's in the Illuminati along with Colonel Saunders before he went belly up.
Them and
The
Aleister
Queen.
Crowley.
The Queen, the Rothschilds. Which don't get me started.
Yeah, that's
Don't get me started on the
We
Rothschilds.
don't have time for that.
Another
that'll be another podcast. The deep cuts.
Like the greatest, you have the greatest is you have the deep cuts. When you're like talking,
We're gonna talk about the Rothschilds and the
Rothschild,
Nazis.
not even their last name. Like you literally choose a last. Like I'm gonna do that. What's your name? Smith? Why? Because I want it to be. Well, what's your real last? It doesn't matter. That is my real last name. I identify as a Rothschild. But what's your last name, Rothschild? No, it isn't.
No, it's
What's your
not.
real last name? Rothschild.
Oh, yeah.
How did you get that? Because there was a office with a red shield painted on it, and Rothschild is red shield in German, and it sounded pretty bad, if you ask me.
How about the royal family? What's your last name? Why'd you change your last name?
What is there? They don't even have a bloody last name. They don't have an honest surname.
Wait, I thought it was that German.
Mountbatten, but that was the English version of their. Right,
What's
but
the
even that's
Guten?
not
The Guten, whatever.
right. But even Saxe Gothenburg.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is my family too. Which is
Is it
funny.
really?
Yeah. Don't hold that against me. Wait,
You
hold on.
royal.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Excuse me while I bow to your greatness.
Yes, please acknowledge my superiority.
Now we know the truth. So this has been all, we all agree with you. We know why now.
Hold on, I want to find this faction. Is it? That'll be easier to find. Let's see.
Which quote are you trying to find?
The Pufendorf one where he's like, at the end of the day, what did they? Let's see. I think this is it right here. Yes, this is it. He said, led away by a private interest, which is opposite to that state, being divided into factions, so parties, they are more concerned with ruining their rivals than following the dictates of reason. Here's a
Kaboom.
You want a deep cut on Poof? Like, don't just, people are reading the whole duty. I get that because it's a synopsis of a much bigger book. Read the bigger book because they left out some really deep cuts in that book. You can't find it in anything other than a facsimile form.
Oh, really?
So it's hecka hard to read, but put in the effort, man. Because Pufendorf's deep cuts, Dude, I was marking so much, it was like I should stop marking.
The whole book
Because all
is
I'm
worth
doing
marking.
is taking black text and highlighting it, right? Just put something at the beginning. Every line should be,
Right.
because the deep
Memorize the book.
Yeah, because I mean, Whole Duty is what are we looking at? 300 pages, maybe.
Yeah.
The book, the source book that they, because when he went to teach it,
it was a textbook.
yeah, when he went to teach at university, freshman, he was teaching them about what natural law. Sorry, the word went around my head. Natural law, and his boss at the university is like, "That's way too much." And so he dialed it down to the Whole Duty, which is 300 pages. Take the source book. It's painful to read because of the facsimile, because it's a facsimile edition from the 1600s, maybe the 1700s, and it's hard to read. But whoa, my man's mind.
Yeah.
Like you read Whole Duty of Man, and you're like, no wonder he's a top 10 guy,
Yeah.
right? No wonder he's top 10 influence on the founding fathers. But you read the source book, and you're just like, what? You're like, dude, why didn't this make the cut for the book?
Right.
I have a course to teach, I guess.
There you go, man. There you go. The role and
Yeah, you really want to do that. You want to do yourselves a kindness. No one will. I say this stuff. No one listens. Nobody cares.
Well, but here's the
Who's gonna
thing.
go out and read the bloody source book of Pufendorf? They're like, Pufendorf, really?
But you did. I mean, you know what I mean?
People ask me that all the time. Like, what got you to this? I don't even know. Like, I give credit in Founders in the introduction to Dr. Vetterli.
Yes.
But if Dr. Vetterli were here, he's passed away, rest in peace, Richard Vetterli. Rest in power, is a great man. But he would deny it, not only because of his humility, but he's like, I never mentioned that stuff to you. But he didn't, right? He simply said, don't drop out of school. Here's the Federalist Papers. Write down things you don't recognize.
Yeah.
Look them up. That was really his contribution. It was one of these things, man. It was hand to heaven. It was Algernon Sidney who, I can't wait to meet that guy and give him such thanks for everything he's done for me personally, for all of us in regard to liberty and everything. But it was him. When I read Discourses, I was like, it took me 5 years. I wrote in the front of my book, my copy that I still have. It took me 5 years to read Discourses because I was determined to look up all the references.
Yeah.
Because dude just drops them. Like even in Court Maxims, like Court Maxims is to Discourses what Whole Duty of Law is to natural law. Whole Duty of Man is to natural law. But anyway, he was the guy that got me there. And I don't know. There's not a time I'm like, oh, I was this and then I was that. There's one of these things you can just make kind of brackets.
Mm-hmm.
But it was 100% Algernon Sidney who, more than any person, is owed the thanks for saving me.
Well, and that's a guy that, again, like
intellectually, obviously Jesus saved me spiritually, but
right. But he's and I'm guessing this is one thing that resonated with you, is that he's a guy that not just like wrote beautifully and coherently and just had bomb after bomb, liberty bomb after liberty bomb, but literally lived it, up and including his life.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's that great of a writer. I think if he had been a better writer, he would have been John Locke.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
as far as how well he's known, I think it's. Although Jefferson says it's an elementary book on the subject, right? Sure, TJ, dial it down. We get it. You're smart. Right? We get it. You're smart. No one's sitting over here. I wonder if Thomas Jefferson's smart. No one's doing that, TJ.
He can write a little bit.
I mean, I think on the other side, Sydney's over there. Whenever TJ walks around, he's like, oh. Whereas little Jimmy walks up, James Brown, he's like, Jimmy, what it do, player? And they talk and stuff. But TJ walks around, they're like, come on, man. I mean, all you have to know about the difference, go to James Madison's grave, go to Thomas Jefferson's grave. That is a sermon. That is all you need to know about the difference in those two men.
Right.
Madison has a tiny little 3-foot obelisk that says Madison.
You can see
Jefferson has a giant temple to his fame that lists everything he ever did. I'm not kidding you. And not only did that happen, because people could say, oh, well, posthumously, when he died, his family won. No. It was in his will.
That's awesome.
He dictated, and Madison says, there's a little something in my family thing. Whereas Jefferson's like, author of the Declaration of Independence, president of the United States, blah, blah, blah. Every little thing, like assistant night manager at Wendy's. Whatever he did, Jefferson has it on his.
You could totally see, and you're right. That'd be funny. You could see Madison up in heaven, Jefferson walking by, and he's saying, yeah, he still doesn't think his farts stink.
Yeah. Oh, totally. He's like, they're friends. They were best friends for 20-something years before Jefferson died. They were friends at the beginning because Madison's like, this is a dude who gets it. And of course, Madison was a guy who, as Jefferson rightly said, the smartest man in the room, no matter what room he was in, and Jefferson planned on writing a biography of James Madison.
I didn't know that.
Didn't get to finish. Jefferson, passed away obviously before. Madison was the last surviving founding father, in fact. But no, Sidney is. He wasn't a good. I don't think he was a good writer, and I don't think he'd be angry with me saying that, because much of discourse is disjointed.
Okay.
Right, but he, nonetheless, if you put in the time.
Well, it wasn't really completed.
And it wasn't complete, right? He still hadn't completed it when he was murdered. And, I'm telling you, man, don't get me started on Sidney. This is turning into hours. That man is, the sun, moon, and stars to me, to be honest. That's why every year I have not missed a year, and I don't know how long the memorial of his passing on December 7th. He's the man in every way. But even the fact that if you went to the head of the American history department at ASU and said, tell me what you know about Algernon Sidney, he'd probably be like, I think he was an anti-monarch Republican, like he was one of those guys, that voted to, regicide to kill King Charles or whatever. He might know that he was influential on the founding fathers to some little degree.
Yeah.
But that'd be it. I used to say 14-year-olds, but I don't teach anymore. Well, that's not true. I do teach founders. I could tell you 14-year-olds right now on a farm in Missouri, hid and unregarded, who could tell you more about Algernon Sidney than the head of the American History Department at ASU. And this is Sidney's observation of history coming to life, that it will be this group of young people when they come of age, having been hid and unregarded, kept out of the indoctrination camps. These kids will reach an age when they will show forth testimony of their love of freedom that will be spoken of for all ages to come. Because when I would say that to those kids at Heritage, I'm like, someday the way we hang pictures of George Washington and James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, they'll hang pictures of you. That's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact. That just all that takes is kids with that knowledge, not just being devils.
Yep.
Knowledge plus virtue, as Richard Price and Cicero mentioned.
You're seeing that with your students, Connor. You're seeing that with the rising generation. There's a lot. There's a lot of people. More. Obviously, we wish there were more. But they'll have babies.
That's what I always tell them. Use math to our advantage. Go create 9 patriots.
Because replenish the earth with liberty.
The geometry of liberty,
Yeah. Yep.
What that Neil Maxwell, the arithmetic of the atonement.
Yeah.
What could we call it?
I like the multiplication of
I don't know, the geometry of liberty.
the geometry of liberty is good.
Well, it is. It's geometric rather than arithmetic. Where did I read that the other day? What was I reading? Make it geometric rather than arithmetic. I don't know.
That's
That's Sydney. Yeah. And Court Maxims. There you go.
There you go.
Who wrote that?
Bring it back
Who is this
home.
Algernon Sydney?
Algernon what?
Can you imagine?
Well,
yes.
I gotta cut this short.
Yes, I know. I do too, because I gotta go pick up my wife in like 11 minutes.
But man, this has been a joy. Thank you, Joey Wolverton, Connor Kimball. You guys rock.
And thank you.
You are listening to And If Love Remains.
First of 23 installments requested by Dr. Levitt. We're trying to be in compliance here because we're taking him and that whole organization down.